Welcome to this Political Pulse. We are joined by U.S. House candidate, Democratic candidate, Nikki Gronli. Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know before announcing this campaign, you were we were just going through this term, you were the State Director for Rural Development under the Biden administration for the state of South Dakota. What did you learn during that experience?
Well, during my time in that position, I spent a lot of time working on infrastructure projects. We worked on housing, we worked with small businesses, and community facilities. A lot of the projects that I got to do had to do with ambulances, fire trucks, hospitals, police cars, and then, of course, numerous water projects across South Dakota. I grew up in Aurora. When I left Aurora to go off to college, town of 500. And so I grew up in a rural community. I've got a passion for rural communities, so there was real joy in helping them, whether it was achieving a new lift station for their water project or getting a hospital or an expansion on a hospital.
Did I get the title correct? This is a long title. It was a long title.
It's a long title. USDA Rural Development State Director for South Dakota.
We'll go right into your decision to run now for U.S. House. What led you to make this decision?
This spring, I started to see a lot of frustration, often online, sometimes in the media, where there were South Dakotans who were asking our members of Congress to do town halls. At that point in time, I started to think about who could possibly provide them the opportunity to have some conversations and let out some of their frustrations. And as I thought about it, I realized I drove all around the state of South Dakota helping mayors, sheriffs, hospital administrators with their challenges and problems. And I thought, well, maybe I should do this. Had no idea how it would go. I didn't know if it would be me and 5 people in a room. But we set 4 dates, got out on the road. I always had some other experts with me, knowledgeable people in the area of ag or education. And as we got out on the road, we saw over 1,000 people in 4 communities. We had to turn away almost 100 people in Sioux Falls. And as I listened to people, and we always brought along any resources we could, we kind of set up a website with resources to try to help people overcome the challenges that they were dealing with.
So you're saying more people showed, you were talking about the town halls, correct? This town hall series that you hosted.
Yes, the town halls.
You're saying more people showed up to these town halls than you had space for in some cases, at least in the Sioux Falls case?
We had standing room in Rapid City and Aberdeen. We had to change rooms in Vermilion because they were expecting more than the original room could seat. And then in Sioux Falls, we reached the fire capacity and security had to unfortunately turn away 100 people.
What were the key takeaways from the testimony you heard from people in these different communities? It sounds like they showed up, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like they showed up to voice their frustrations with the current administration. What seemed to be your biggest takeaways?
Tariffs, of course, are a huge one. People started to see at that point in time in the spring that they were potentially coming, and there was a lot of concern around those tariffs. We heard from some ag producers on what those would do to them, and the uncertainty of putting their crops in the spring and what that would yield this fall, which of course now we're starting to see what's going on there. We heard from parents who had children who were disabled who were greatly concerned about cuts to things like Medicaid and what that could potentially do for their families. We heard concerns about the economy when it comes to tourism. And actually now in South Dakota, we've seen tourism is down anywhere from 9 to 40% in visitor spending across the state, depending on, the business we're talking to.
So based on that testimony that you heard, what do you think the strategy should be for Democrats across the U.S.? I'm sure you'll be adopting some of this yourself as they go and they try to seek some of these House and Senate seats in the midterms next year.
I'd say the priority for any Dem running in their state should be addressing the issues of their state and staying focused on their state. When I think about the fact that we've got some manufacturers that have voiced their opinion on the tariffs and the inability to bring things into the country and how that's impacting their manufacturing here in South Dakota, we need to take those things serious.
What should the message be to Congress right now? One of the things, and I'm talking about trade specifically, story. It's so we're doing this interview for people who are watching this right now. We are doing this interview on Thursday. This will be airing on Monday. Tomorrow's Friday, so people can go backwards now. We're going to go back in time, and I'm going to be running a story. We were in Pierre a few days ago. This was on Monday. Senator Mike Rounds hosted a roundtable with different ag producers, and one of the sectors we talked to is the soybean industry. As you know, they're in a critical time right now as the U.S. and China, and as of Thursday, today, are in a trade stalemate. What do you think Congress's message should be to the president over specifically that trade?
At this point in time, I've been disappointed in the fact that our members of Congress aren't taking their constitutional right to tax, and tariffs are a tax on the American people, and taking back that right from the executive branch. I'm sure that they maybe have tried to have some conversations, but at this point in time, I want them to put our farmers first. My greatest concern is, though, that at this point in time, that soybean market in China isn't coming back. We saw after the tariffs during the first Trump administration that we lost some of that market, and it never did come back. At this point in time, China is obviously holding very strong. They buy a large amount of our soybeans, and I'm concerned that market isn't coming back. Soybean Association at the American level has said it would take 60, maybe as much as 66 countries and trade deals to make up for the market that we lost with China. With our members of Congress, they have the right to taxation. It's given by the Constitution, and again, they should be yielding that right and being a check on the power of the executive branch.
Do you agree with any of the concepts of the use of tariffs right now in expanding trade in some of these foreign countries, given that we are in an ag state? Is there any, in your opinion, is there any merit to the use of them as it's being used right now? And part of this is to expand some of that trade, equal out some of that trade between countries.
You know, tariffs should be used when it's appropriate. It's a negotiating tactic. And what we're seeing right now is across the board, you know, tariffs, variety of countries, and it's hurting us not just in the ag sector. Obviously, we've upset our allies, Canada, with the fact that we've put tariffs on them. That's hurting our tourism industry here in South Dakota. Like I said, we're seeing anywhere from 9 to 40% visitor spending down across the state. What's missing? A lot of those neighbors to the north come to South Dakota for our tourist season. That's impacting us. Our farmers are being impacted, and we're not seeing clear, concise goals out of the administration on what they're trying to accomplish in each of these. There's always going to be countries that we will not have balanced trade with. And that comes from the fact that as Americans, we have real buying power. We are one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. And that gives us the ability to purchase at a greater quantity and amount.
I want to go back to strategy here. You're running in a rural state. Do you think as somebody running in the Democratic Party in a rural state, are there any key places you plan to kind of separate yourself maybe from your urban counterparts, people from bigger cities in your party?
Well, when we talk about kind of what I'd say are my big four, number one is the economy. Then we look at the situation with ag. We've got education and we've got healthcare, really are the areas I'm concerned about. And they're intertwined. With ag, if we see consolidation because small and mid-sized farms can't make it through this moment in time where they've lost markets, that impacts main streets in our small communities. That means a business has less people buying their product. That means the school system has less children in it. We've already seen way too much consolidation with school systems where we've got kids traveling way too far on buses to get to school and back. We don't want to see any more consolidation, and we don't want a hollowing out of South Dakota and our communities in the middle. Those small, mid-size, and specialty producers out there, they matter to our economy. And I would say the difference is, I'm thinking about our rural hospitals, our rural schools, and what those ag producers mean to them, and trying to make sure that we're prioritizing those small communities. Like I said, I grew up in a small town. I got to work on infrastructure and projects in small towns. It matters to me and I care.
You told me coming on here that you are focused, and you told me a few weeks ago about this, sounds like this is still on your mind, that you're focused on the possible expiration of enhanced premium tax credits wrapped up in the ACA. Those are set to expire at the end of the year. Yeah. How will that impact South Dakota should they expire? I know right now it sounds like, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's a little bit of possible negotiation there with those happening right now in Congress.
Absolutely. So within the healthcare space, those ACA tax credits often are being utilized by farmers, ranchers, small business owners. My husband and I are small business owners. Our option is the ACA to get health care, just like a lot of farmers and ranchers across the state. I even talked to the Farmers Union, who of course has their health insurance policies that a lot of farmers and ranchers access. And I said, I'm kind of concerned that they may not be thinking about this impacting them. They're already getting hit by the tariff situation. What if all of a sudden they're seeing a doubling of their premiums, their tax credits? And Farmers Union, they said, it's possible, because what happens when you go to get that insurance is you go to them, you need a policy, those policies get sent out to you, you pick one. It's often Avera or Sanford that you're getting billed from monthly. And it would be real easy to forget about the fact that it is actually an ACA plan that is covering the farmer, the rancher, the small business owner. So I'm very concerned, number one, that we have a bunch of folks in South Dakota who may not realize that they're going to be impacted at all. The average increase nationwide is about $760 a month. And in South Dakota, we know we've got about 53,000 people that are potentially going to be impacted because they're using the ACA for their health insurance. A lot of families, especially small business owners, our farmers, can't afford another $760 a month. Now, you have the other things that come out of that. Your local hospital and clinic all of a sudden may be losing folks who aren't coming in for their regular annual physicals, coming in for the basics that they need for healthcare. Instead, they may end up in the emergency room because they no longer have healthcare, and we know that's the most expensive form of health coverage out there. We don't want to see more clinics, more hospitals closing. We don't want to lose those senior care centers because of the ramifications of losing these tax credits.
Another item you said you're watching is education spending. That's being discussed right now. Again, this is Thursday, September 25th.
Yeah.
By the time this airs, that critical deadline, I think that we're still in September, if I'm not mistaken, on Monday.
Yep, September 30th at midnight is the deadline for that budget bill, and I'm watching closely to see what they decide to do with it. On the House side, they have an $18 million cut to South Dakota for education. Now, overall, it's billions of dollars nationwide that would be cut for public education. South Dakota's impact would be $18 million. It would impact about 140,000 students. And for the Rapid City School District, it amounts to about $1.4 million that would be taken from the school district if that House budget gets through.
In that spending, can you explain what that money is that's being cut, what's used for?
A variety of programs, everything from mental health services, helping teachers with their annual training. There is technology and digital literacy learning stuff that is in there. And also it impacts some after school and summer programs. So it is kind of a variety of things that they are doing a 15% budget cut on public education. That means for South Dakota, if that $18 million is cut, our schools are going to have to figure out if they try to make that up somehow. And we've already had big discussions here about property taxes, or they try to actually cut back on that and go without that money. We know that about 43% of the schools in this state already have teacher shortages. Losing that money will not make that better.
I want to go back to your decision to run and talk about a couple of things here. So what would you say your number one priority would be? Or actually, maybe we'll make this a little bit easier, because number one, that's kind of hard. I'm kind of putting you too much on the spot there. What are your top three priorities?
I would say economy, number one. And when I talk about economy, those tariffs are the biggest concern for me, because those impact everything from somebody going to the grocery store, buying bananas, or, as I've seen recently in my grocery store, buying coffee. Something so simple that went from $9.99 is now $19.99 in my grocery store because of those tariffs. Those things hit families. We know that the tariffs are impacting our tourist industry, our ag industry, and all of that is going to overall hurt South Dakota. So number one, the economy. Number two, healthcare. I know that we've got a lot of South Dakotans, like I said, who were able to get healthcare coverage because of Medicaid expansion and the Affordable Care Act. That actually reduces the cost of healthcare for all of us. We want people to have access to the basic healthcare in a clinic before it evolves into something that is cancer or something tragic that takes them out of the workforce and is very costly to battle. And then I would say number three for me is our ag industry. I do think from a policy perspective that we do need to look at the treatment of our small, middle, and specialty producers. They don't necessarily get treated in the same way as our larger producers when it comes to things like recovering from weather incidents and also the insurance that they have access to. I want to level that playing field for our small, medium, specialty producers, because, as I said, I don't want to see a hollowing out of the middle of our state in our small towns, and that's a way to solve it.
I guess my final question would be is how confident are you that you're going to be, and maybe some of this comes from those town halls that you're hosting, that you'll be able to win in a pretty heavily Republican state. I'm curious your sense of confidence there.
I think that South Dakotans are ready for some change. It's the way I feel about it, the outreach that I've received, and the response to those town halls. I've had Republicans come to the events and talk to me about their concerns. I've had veterans talk about cuts to the VA and what they're experiencing. And the fact is, there's several of those individuals that I've right away gone to work for. I've reached out to nutrition groups for an individual who was concerned about cuts to their local food bank, and put them in touch with a coalition that is statewide so that they can get up to date on the latest information for their food bank and try to collaborate with some others who are also working on that issue. With the veteran situation, right away I got their information. We're connecting with some veterans groups to try to see if there's anything we can do, maybe to put pressure on our current members of Congress to take care of those issues.
Do you think, oh, sorry.
So At this point in time, I think that there is a desire to see somebody go to Washington, D.C. and take the concerns of South Dakotans there. People aren't feeling heard, and I'm going to give them that. I'm going to let them be heard.
You pointed out tariffs. When you're number one, you say economy, and then you go straight into tariffs. So how would you plan to take on tariffs from the point of a U.S. House seat?
So the interesting thing is, across the country, we are seeing Democratic Party members winning in these special elections. We just had one in Arizona. And so what we're starting to see is a potential swing towards a Democratic majority. I do believe that the Democratic Party members are going to make sure that they are being a check on the executive branch and dealing with those tariff issues and saying we need to take these one at a time. There is not an emergency, which is what is being used to put these tariffs forward. And I think that is the quickest way to solve it. Now, we're not only just seeing in these special elections that Democrats are winning, they're also outperforming the Republican side by huge margins.
Okay, I want to give you the floor here to just anything we haven't touched on that you would like to get across.
With South Dakota and the fact that we had the reconciliation bill that went through in early July, there are going to be things that we as South Dakotans are going to start to feel here in the state. One of those things goes back to education and the fact that with the SNAP cuts that were in that program, or in the reconciliation bill, we are going to see schools have to do an audit of 100% of the students who are receiving free or reduced meals. What that means for our larger school districts is the potential of having to actually hire more people on to do that work. So here's just another little hit on education in South Dakota, bringing costs back here. We know that 43% of our state budget is federal money. Our legislature last session had a terrible time trying to fit everything into the budget because of the reconciliation bill and these little hits that are going to start coming. We're going to see more of that. It's going to be harder for our legislators here in South Dakota to make that budget work.
Okay, South Dakota House congressional candidate, former Biden administration appointee, Nikki Gronli, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and that's going to be your Political Pulse.